Moving things along, Andre is going to be presenting next on accounts or so 20th century.
Let me see how I can share my screen. No,
Andre, I'm finding your microphone volume seems a little low.
if I can speak in my phone, would that help?
Yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
little better.
Okay, great. Let me try if I can share my presentation. I'm not sure how this would work. I never seem to have worked with Zoom giving a presentation, so sorry for that. Here I am. Can you see my screen? Yes. Well, for those who don't know me, I'm Andre Coat. I'm working for a Finnish cybersecurity company. My hobby is identity access management. And like Chloe said before, well, you have to take a break from your passion. Well, that's kind of hard if your hobby is your work. I'm I'm a member of the ID Pro, which is an identity specialist professional organization. And within the ID Pro, I'm working for the body of knowledge, creating knowledge, writing down articles, sharing articles, reviewing whatever. So I will be talking about identity and access management. And let me first state that identity and access management is not the right term for the what I'm discussing. I'm talking about identity management and access control. And access control, in fact, what I'm working on the last time, and not as a hacker, because I'm not a hacker. I'm a business consultant. Like Daniela said before, my role is trying to get the business involved in security matters. And business should be involved in security because security cannot exist. It's there to support the business, and business and IT, alignment is kind of difficult. And most IAM projects I'm working on started as an IT project, and that's where it goes wrong most of the time because they forget that the business should be involved in identity and access management. Well, as I said, there's identity management. That's all about managing identities. And managing identities, it's a process you don't want to do. Managing identity is onboarding, moving, offboarding employees. It's very expensive. It can take a lot of stress. It takes a lot of time, and well, it's a nasty process. And I got a simple example here. We got a Twitter account of Barack Obama, who's trusted. His identity is managed in Twitter by Twitter. In fact, he does it himself. But last days we just saw this, and even a trusted identity can be fully untrusted, fully mistrusted. This is a typical case of the issue of managing identities. It's we don't know yet what's the case, but we got to have some ideas. But anyway, even a trusted identity may not be the identity we think it is. So identity management is very expensive, very risk. There's a lot of risk involved, and it means that, in my opinion, well, this Barack Obama identity is a very relevant identity, but the identity is only valid within the context of Twitter. And if we try to get the meaning of this account, this Barack Obama account, if we try to get meaning of it, we have to say that the meaning of this account is the value of the what he's stating as his messages are only valid in the context of Twitter. That's where the account is created, that's your account is managed, and that's where the value of the messages is. If you trust Twitter, then you can trust the message. If you don't trust Twitter, well, then the message is not relevant at all. I do trust Twitter for the purpose of Twitter, sharing content, sharing messages, sharing social events within the context of Twitter, but it doesn't mean anything. And trust in the context is very relevant. Identity, it belongs to a context. Let me say this, for instance, I'm living in the Netherlands, so I'm a citizen of the Dutch state of the Netherlands. I'm working for Nixu, I'm an employee with the company. I'm doing my shopping at Amazon or whatever. I'm a customer at Amazon. I'm a club, I've got some social media accounts, but all these identities belong to the context. My citizen identity I can't use for the company. I can't use my company identity to be a member of a club. So we should understand that an identity an account is part of the context where it's created, where it's managed. Now there is, at least luckily, there is some way to reuse identities, because managing all these identities is hell. we all know that we don't have the issue of passwords, of resetting passwords. There are data leaks, data breaches everywhere where identity is managed. So what's really valuable at this moment is that we can reuse identity. We can reuse identities. And that principle is called federation, meaning I can use my citizen account, a social security number to onboard in a company, or I can use my company identity to, well, benefit from the fact that I'm a company and the company has got a deal with a web shop and I get some benefits, some discounts. So there is some relevance in reusing identities, and a reused identity can be more valuable, but only if and as far as you can trust the identity provider. So for instance, for my company, we could trust the Dutch citizen identity if we trust the Dutch government as an identity provider. Well, if you know the Dutch identity, you wouldn't trust it that much. So that identity is not very valuable. But for our company, my Nixu account is more valuable than the Dutch citizen account. But my Nixu account is not valuable in your company. It's not valuable at all. It may be very relevant. It may be a very reliable onboarding process. My passport has been checked. My diplomas have been verified. So I have been screened, whatever. So my internal, for my company, my identity is very valuable. But outside my company, outside the context of my company, it's worthless. So if we look at the context, if I want to log into a context, if I want to use the identity in a context, I have to log into the context. Username, password, well, you know the horror forest, password management. We hate passwords. But what's happening in this case, I'm logging into an identity provider, and I'll be member of the identity provider. The identity provider takes care of my identity, and I can use that identity within the context of the identity provider. If it's a company or a citizen, a country, whatever, a web shop, I can use my identity in that context. And that means I get a context-bound identity, which I can perhaps reuse outside of the context, but in the context, I got a context identity. And my authorizations are, well, if I'm looking into Amazon, my authorizations are customer of Amazon. So my authorizations are connected to a role I get within the identity provider, within the context. So within the context next to, I'm an employee. I get the employee role. And as a manager, I'll get an additional role as a manager or as a professional or as a consultant or whatever. So that's all within the context. And we know and we trust the context identities. Every identity within the context is equally valuable, equally reliable. So that's the part within the same context. If we go out of the context, then we don't log in. That's the new concept of federation. We don't log in, we get access. And that means we don't log in. We don't have a context identity. We don't use a context identity, no login, no account, no password. So you can't lose what you don't have. So if I use my Nextcloud environment, I don't want to log into my Nextcloud environment. I try to reuse an existing identity from other context, an out of context identity. And that's a digital identity. So I don't log in. I use a digital identity and use a bunch of protocols that support that. So if my digital identity, which is provided by a digital identity provider, IDP, like Twitter, like Facebook, like my company, like the country, like the government, these are all identity providers. And what's happening at the identity provider, I get a digital identity, means it gets registered, it can be verified, it's depending on the level of trust and level of control in the company. It does also mean that my identity provider will register some attributes of my identity, like first name, last name, shoe size, whatever is relevant. And if possible, it will assert some of the attributes that are registered. So for instance, in my company, my role as a consultant has been asserted by the company. So within Nixu, I'm a consultant and my customers know I'm a consultant at Nixu. And the relevance of this is if you trust the identity provider, then you can trust your identities. If you don't trust your identity provider, you don't trust the identities. So for instance, if we would like to use Twitter as an identity provider to log into the company, we say, well, I know Twitter a little. I can trust Twitter for a small amount. My Twitter account is not equal to my company account. So if we trust Twitter a little, I can only have a little authorizations. So not every identity provider is equal, not all trust is equal, not all identities are equal. So in the federation style of access, we don't log in, we use our digital identities, and these are provided by the identity provider to a service provider, to a company, to a website, whatever, using some of the protocols, federation protocols. I'm not sure, I guess you all know these protocols. We don't discuss in LDAP or Kerberos. These are very old style protocols, and crossing domains is difficult, but the modern identity protocols are SAML, SAML, OWASP, OpenID Connect. These are the modern federation protocols that you can use and reuse to cross boundaries, across domains. SAML is an old style identity protocol. It's been provided by an identity provider in life, real life. At the moment you need request identity, the SAML will be created by the identity provider. OWASP and OpenID Connect are modern token-based digital identities. And all these identities have in common that they show the identity, who you are, and show some attributes that are provided by the identity provider. Well, nothing special, no rocket science. We use it all the time. Whenever you use an app on your mobile phone, the app is using the OWASP protocol to supply tokens to the service you'd like to request, but that's all. That's quite easy. It's not rocket science anymore. You can just buy this or use it every day. But that's all about identity. And now let's move to access. That's more exciting, because access is the question, who can do what? Well, that's not very special. And what we tend to forget is the why does someone have access? And this is where the business to IT alignment issue happens. Identity is mostly technical stuff. Mostly IT business can supply identities, can create identities, can synchronize identities, not very specific. But access control is much more difficult. It's very business related. It's about, why does someone have access to his patient records or to his financial documentation? Why does someone have access to Twitter records? Or why does someone have access to, it's a different matter. It's not a technical question, it's a business question. So who defines these access rules? Who can decide why does someone have access to whatever? And this is what I've been researching for some time now, some 10 years now. This is what I came up with. And this is the different types of owners who all have a stake in defining the access policy. And if you look at this lineup, there's only one person who's responsible for identity. This is a line manager, hierarchical manager, who knows his personnel, knows his employees, who knows who can do what. And the other parties are in fact not relevant, not interested in identities at all. Like the process owner, the business process owner. Well, for instance, we have a business process like transporting my laptop from Amsterdam to Brussels. The business process owner only wants to know that I, as a driver, have my driver license. He doesn't care who I am. He only wants to know, am I competent? Am I authorized to drive a car? He doesn't want to know who I am. He needs to know that I transported the goods, so he needs to know that I was the identity responsible for the task, but he doesn't want to manage my identity. Same for application owners, data owners. They don't care about me as an identity, perhaps as a subject, as an object, so for registering or logging auditing purposes, but he doesn't care who I am. The data owner, he only wants to know, are we compliant with the GDPR or other privacy regulations or other agreements, other laws and regulations. He doesn't care who I am. Only if I try to access personal data, he then needs to know why do you need to address personal data. He doesn't want to know who I am. He just wants to know that I'm authorized by someone to access those data. Head of IT, he doesn't want to know who I am. He just wants to know that if I'm using my laptop, that I'm using WPA protocol for Wi-Fi, or that whatever is relevant in that stake. So my laptop has the latest patches for Windows 10. That's all he wants to know. He doesn't want to know who I am. He just wants to know that I'm not a liability for accessing his infrastructure. So different owners in any organization with different risks, different controls, different reasons why they want to define the access policy. And it's interesting, this is, yeah. So But if we use federation as a setting within the context, you use a login, you get an account and you get a role. But in federation style of access, there are no roles. We don't have role-based access control anymore, but we can define roles. We can have role as an attribute, but in the federation style of access, we're using different kinds of access control methods. And the most well known is the attribute-based access control. Well, there are some other terms, but we move to policy-based access control, meaning access policy-based access control. That means that there must be an access policy defined by someone who is responsible for that. Well, we just saw those owners, and these access policies define whether you get access. And there are different variables within that. We'll see that later on. This is the new metaphor for getting access, not based on roles, not based on access control lists, but based on access policies. And that's even more important since we're moving to a new world. We're moving away from applications. In applications like SAP or whatever financial system of an electronic health patient systems, we see that you have to log in within the context of the application. Application is a context. But in the new world, we're moving to CI/CD. We're moving away from applications. We're moving to services, APIs, microservices. So we're even moving to service meshes. And that means that if you look at the new world we're working in, we have those very small components, small microservices, and those services are too small to manage identities. So we need to define when can you access a microservice, when can you access an API, and why do you have access to the API? So it's not based on identities anymore. There must be some other means to define access on APIs. And that's where we get this policy-based access control. And this is a small world you're looking at. Let me get back. You see the compass, north, east, southwest. This in a new world, we're talking about north, south, and east, west security. North, south is, as you can see in this picture, we got the external world, external context, and we're moving, getting access from the outside world into the inside world. It's called north-south security. And east-west means we got security internal, meaning API to API, web service to web service, identity accounts to services. And that's the east-west part, but that's just the new way of talking, I guess. And what you can see in this setup is very simple. If we go, we try to secure the crown jewels. These are data, services, systems, whatever we have in organizations. In order to get access to the crown jewels, you can only have access if you comply with the access policy. Well, this policy is managed by the PAP, Policy Administration Point. That's where the different owners manage their access policies. And you only get access to the access policy if the access policy is verified. If your access request is verified, that's the purpose of the policy decision point and the policy administration point. So first, if we go from left, client application using an AD, an internal account, trying to access this crown jewel application of the microservices, you get to the access gateway, an API gateway or whatever web file you can imagine. It's called a policy enforcement point. And before you get access, the policy enforcement point says, well, I have to enforce the access policy. That's the purpose of the policy decision point, the PDP. And that PDP will verify the access policies, and only if you're compliant with access policies, then you get access to the crown jewels. And so the policies can, let me see if I can show this. Yeah. So policies, I need to, this one. The policy can be, are you coming from a trusted identity provider? Well, if it's internal, it's trusted, but what's the context during office hours? What device type? Are you logging in using multi-factor authentication? Are you authenticated in a fitting way? Or even more business style authorizations like, are you compliant with segregation of duty rules? So if you perform task 1 in the process, are you allowed to perform task 2 or not? So these are all kinds of business rules that's been defined by these different types of owners. All these owners have a stake in the access control decision. So it's not just one person, it's a lot of persons who are responsible for the access policies. And the interesting part of the new world where we're working in, the federation world, is that these access policies are valid globally. So if you're coming from a an external web client from using identity from an external identity provider, be it Facebook or Twitter or citizen identity, it doesn't matter. It will still be passed the same way, same access gateway, same policy enforcement, same policy administration, same verification of the policy. And for instance, you could use your Facebook account to get access, but if Facebook is not in the policy as a trusted identity provider, then you don't get access. Or perhaps you get access to the menu of the restaurant, that's all, but you don't get access unless you're compliant to the policy. The same for mobile apps or even things and sensors, things that try to get access to. For instance, sensor information must be transferred to the backend systems. Well, that still has to comply with the same kind of policies. Different components, different policies, different risks, of course, but it's the same architecture that can support all these kinds of access. So in essence, the new way of working, new way of access control is not about identity, it's all about access. It's not about identity management, it's all about access control. Whereas identity management is kind of a process, access control is not a process, responsibility is ongoing process responsibility, because, well, there are different owners who have their own responsibility. So, well, it's just called, should be a lightning talk, so I hope that's fast enough for you and gives you enough interest in indication of the way we're working on the new developments. And I hope it's funny enough for you. Ah, besides, I forgot the magic word, zero trust. Zero trust, we know the term zero trust from the network security environments using encryption, segmentation, zoning. Well, in my view, zero trust is also, are you compliant with access policies? Only if you're compliant, if you're fully trusted, then you get access to the crown jewel. So that's, I forgot this one. That's about it for now. Well, this is what I created for customer, but it's not very interesting. Thank you very much.
That was really awesome. Just want to say thank you, Andre. I don't know how many people have their cameras and mics on, but maybe people can say it in the chat too. And does anyone have any questions for Andre before we bring in more speakers?
If you like to have the presentation, I can share it with you, but I'll take care of this for you, Chris.
You're gonna share a video version or the slides?
No, if you get this video, you can share the video. Otherwise, you can share the slides. No worry. Larry had a question above. Let's see that question. Is that login as your Google ID? Is there an entity that provides like that? Do you mean using a digital identity to get access to anything? Because Google is one of the identity providers. And if you trust Google enough to supply an identity, then you can use that, of course. But for our company, we might accept Google as an identity provider, but we will not allow any authorizations apart from showing that you can, well, perhaps see our web page to order stuff, whatever. Same for others. So if the different business owners should define what level of trust they allow for the identity provider. So that's it. And for private use, yeah, you can use Google if you trust it. As long as you trust it. Yeah, trusted identity providers. Well, it's all context based. You can only use an identity provider in the context you use, and if you trust it, that's all. And there are no globally accepted trusted identity providers, I guess, apart from the various signs of this world. That's about it. So if you trust Google or Facebook or Twitter, use those as much as possible. Federation is nice. I like it. So thank you very much for listening in.